Guo Jiakun said what the Asia-Pacific region most needs is peace and tranquility, and what it least needs is the introduction of external forces to create division and confrontation. The sea lanes of the Indo-Pacific are more than lines on a chart. They are the staging ground where commerce meets strategy, where diplomacy is sometimes spoken in port calls, and more often in the wake left by a passing warship. In the past weeks, those lanes have become an unusually busy stage, navies and air forces moving in patterns that are as much political as they are operational, and every transit, every drill, every carrier passage carrying a message as loud as any public statement. On April 20th, 2026, the Philippines and the United States formally launched Balikatan 2026. The exercise, which runs through early May, brought together more than 17,000 troops from the Philippines, the United States, and partner nations, including Australia, Canada, France, New Zealand, and for the first time at operational scale, Japan. The drills were declared to be defensive, focused on interoperability, live fire training, amphibious operations, air and naval coordination, and scenarios designed to test how allied forces would operate together in a contested environment. Japan's contribution marked a turning point in how Tokyo projects cooperation overseas. The Japan Self-Defense Forces dispatched roughly 1,400 personnel, multiple warships, aircraft, and for the first time in Philippine waters, surface-CISO surface missile firings conducted under the new Japan-Philippines Reciprocal Access Agreement. The deployment reflects a clear policy shift in Tokyo, a government that has moved decisively to build broader deterrent capabilities and to be able to operate alongside partners farther from home than in past decades. Those allied maneuvers did not go unnoticed in Beijing. Chinese statements and military activity echoed in pace with the drills. The People's Liberation Army's Eastern and Southern Theater Commands described a series of naval and aerial operations in adjacent waters. A Chinese carrier strike group centered on the carrier Liaoning transited the Taiwan Strait on April 20, the first reported Chinese carrier passage through the strait since late last year. Taiwan's military tracked the movement closely. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense had monitored the situation and responded. Carriers have always served as a visible instrument of national power. Their movement is both a practical demonstration of naval capability and a symbolic signal to capitals across the region. Other planned task groups operated in waters to Japan's southwest and east of Luzon, the northernmost major island of the Philippines. Ships were observed transiting between Amami Oshima and Yokohama and between Yonaguni and Iriomote, corridors that intersect Japan's southern island chain and are watched closely by Tokyo. The PLA's Southern Theater Command publicly acknowledged naval drills in waters east of Luzon, led by a modern Type 055 guided missile destroyer, and described those activities as a necessary action taken in response to the current regional situation. At the same time, Allied maritime and air assets were exercising in ways meant to demonstrate cohesion and deterrence. Live fire events, amphibious rehearsals, coordinated air sorties, and logistical operations. The calculus in Washington, Manila, and allied capitals has been straightforward on the surface: reassure friends, signal resolve, and preserve the rules that keep the world's busiest shipping lanes open. In Beijing's telling, those same activities are destabilizing the introduction of external forces into a region Beijing regards as its neighborhood. That gap in narratives is central to the current risk environment. For Manila and Washington, greater cooperation with third-party partners is meant to strengthen deterrence against coercion and to reassure allies. For Beijing, the expansion of exercises, the presence of carriers, and the visible deployment of advanced weaponry near its claimed areas of interest are framed as provocative moves that could erode regional trust. The messaging is mutual, consistent, and designed to shape perceptions, but the danger is not only what leaders say, it is what happens at sea when ships and aircraft operate close together under tense conditions. Commercial interests feel the pressure as well. The Indo-Pacific holds arteries of global trade, energy shipments, consumer goods, raw materials. When naval activity intensifies, commercial shipping companies adjust risk models. They may reroute vessels, accept delays, pay higher insurance premiums, or factor the probability of temporary safety zones into freight costs. Even absent an incident, the economic ripple effects of heightened geopolitical tension can be wide and immediate. The human dimension is never abstract. Sailors stand watch in pre-dawn hours. Merchant captains thread congested straits. Coastal communities track the noise of distant drills. For those ashore, policy choices made in capitals translate into concrete anxieties and disruptions. When a Navy announces live fire training in a corridor used daily by tankers and container ships, logistics managers and insurers pay attention. When aircraft crisscross a narrow body of water where fishing vessels also operate, the risk calculus on small boats changes overnight. Regionally, the moves have prompted close attention and recalibration. Tokyo's expanded role in Bala-Katan is the most visible example of a broader trend in which regional democracies are strengthening capabilities and forging interoperability to respond to a faster, more complex threat environment. Some analysts see this as a necessary response to the scale and pace of China's military modernization. Others warn that rapid shifts in posture combined with intense signaling can compress decision timelines and increase the chance of miscalculation. That danger is real. At sea, small mistakes escalate quickly. Close encounters between military vessels or aircraft, ambiguous intentions, or communication breakdowns all raise the risk that an inadvertent collision or misread maneuver could trigger a wider crisis. For that reason, analysts and practitioners stress the value of both deterrence and dialogue. Robust defensive postures can coexist with practical steps to lower the odds of accidents, clearer exercise notifications, hotlines between navies and air forces, and agreed mechanisms for incident investigation. Channels of communication are uneven across the region. Where formal mechanisms exist, established hotlines, predictable exchanges of information, friction is easier to manage. Where they do not, each transit and drill becomes an exercise in interpretation. That uncertainty is what makes every carrier sortie, every live fire event, and every multinational landing rehearsal more than a training moment. They are elements in an unfolding narrative that political leaders, media outlets, and domestic audiences read for signs of resolve or vulnerability. Beijing's message has been consistent and pointed. The Chinese Foreign Ministry's spokesperson warned against the widening military cooperation around the Philippines and said that such moves risked eroding regional trust. Hui Jiakun said what the Asia-Pacific region most needs is peace and tranquility, and what it least needs is the introduction of external forces to create division and confrontation. That line sums up Beijing's diplomatic posture, emphasized stability while condemning the involvement of extra-regional forces, even as China itself demonstrates a larger naval footprint farther from its shores. At the operational level, the PLA has framed its exercises as routine training and necessary responses. Satellite imagery, videos shared by analysts, and official video releases showed large surface combatants, including modern destroyers and support formations, conducting coordinated maneuvers east of Luzon and in waters approaching the broader Western Pacific. Those activities were synchronized in timing with Bala-Katan and other allied movements, underscoring the choreography that now defines many interactions in the region: action, counteraction, and an overlay of public statements. Across the corridor between the East China Sea and the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait remains emblematic of the broader contest. Taipei rejects mainland China's claim to the Strait and insists on internationally recognized rights. Washington and allies likewise view the waterway as international and conduct regular transits. Those transits, whether carriers, destroyers, or routine naval movements, are read through strategic lenses on all sides. The recent passage of a Chinese carrier through the Strait, tracked closely by Taiwan's forces, illustrates how high-visibility operations can serve both tactical and psychological aims. These developments also have a diplomatic echo in capitals outside the immediate theater. Moscow, aligning rhetorically with Beijing on strategic issues, criticized Japan's expanded role in exercises around the Philippines and framed such participation as adding to regional tension. European partners watching the Indo-Pacific have likewise weighed in, balancing concerns over freedom of navigation with worries about escalation. What strategic options do states face? There is no single path to reduced risk, but several practical elements recur in expert recommendations. First, transparency, more predictable notices of exercises, and clearer public outlines of intent. Second, reliable communication, functioning hotlines between militaries and established channels for real-time clarification. Third, incident avoidance protocols that are widely adopted and exercised to responses to near misses or calm, structured and not ad hoc. Fourth, sustained diplomacy, not just one-off statements, but repeated engagement to build confidence over time. For policymakers, the balance is delicate. Demonstrating credibility matters. Allies must be reassured, forces must be trained to operate together, and deterrence must be visible. Yet that same demonstration, if not paired with deliberate efforts to manage risk, can raise tensions. In short, deterrence and dialogue must be treated as complementary tools, not substitutes. The geopolitical geometry of the Indo-Pacific is also shaped by geography itself. Narrow straits, chains of islands, and choke points concentrate maritime traffic and military activity in predictable corridors. That concentration magnifies friction when strategic competition intensifies. It also means that relatively small tactical actions can carry outsized implications for regional stability. Economic consequences remain practical and immediate. Shipping companies account for the cost of longer voyages and higher premiums. Insurers reassess risk and adjust rates. Markets respond to spikes in geopolitical risk indices. In a world where supply chains are finely tuned and global commerce depends on predictability, the perceived risk of conflict, even without violence, imposes tangible costs. At sea, however, the immediate actors are human beings, watchstanders on warship bridges, aviators in cockpits, merchant mariners stretched thin on long passages. Their professionalism matters in moments of friction. Training that emphasizes de-escalatory communications, clear maneuvering rules, and mutual expectations can make the difference between an incident and an avoided incident. The imperative, then, is twofold. First, maintain credible defense and readiness among partners to deter coercion and reassure those who live under the shadow of potential force. Second, invest in the institutional and diplomatic architecture that lowers the odds of miscalculation, transparent exercise schedules, effective hotlines, agreed-upon incident protocols, and persistent diplomacy that keeps channels open even as deployments increase. The Indo-Pacific sea lanes will continue to be both arteries of global trade and a stage for strategic signaling. The choices made by leaders in Beijing, Washington, Tokyo, Manila, and allied capitals will ripple outward into the routines of commerce, the anxieties of coastal communities, and the watch schedules of sailors who shoulder the burden of maintaining safety at sea. In a crowded, fast-moving maritime environment, the real work will not be headlines, but the steady, often unrewarded labor of keeping communications open, clarifying intention, and ensuring that training for crisis does not become the prelude to one. The region has not drifted overnight into crisis. But the density of activity around key waterways compresses decision timelines and leaves less margin for error. The challenge for leaders is to pair resolute preparation with patient statesmanship, to show force where needed, but to build the habits and mechanisms that make miscalculation less likely. Only by coupling readiness with restraint, by making deterrence and dialogue two sides of the same policy, can the Indo-Pacific preserve the freedom of the seas and the steady exchange of goods and people that underpins so much of the world's economy and security.